Welcome to Milestone Moments, the show where we explore the journeys that lead to success. I'm Sheila Slick, your host and founder of 5 Milestones. In every episode, we will bring you insights from the minds of entrepreneurs, leaders, and experts who will share not just their expertise, but the milestone moments that have reshaped their journeys and led to significant achievements. So if you're looking for motivation, you're in the right place. Subscribe now and discover the milestones that mark the path to success. Welcome to another episode of Milestone Moments in Business and Leadership. I'm Sheila Slick, your host. And today, my very special guest is venture capitalist and educator Brandon Na. With over 25 years of experience of a career spanning in education, marketing, and startups, Brandon has helped companies achieve remarkable exits and then growing another company 1,400% in under 3 years. Brandon has also helped hundreds of young adults reach their initial educational milestones at Stanford Online HS, Yale, Andover, and more. Welcome to the show, Brandon.
Well, thank you, Sheila, for having me.
I'd love to first hear your origin story. What led you to become a VC? Walk me through that journey.
Sure. To be honest, it's a long story, but I'll try to encapsulate it as short as possible because obviously we don't have a ton of time here to listen to my entire life story here. But briefly, in 2020, when I was doing my own startup called whenileave.com, I encountered VCs in the industry, and at the time, I didn't know where VCs were as far as the time you should actually contact VCs, because what people don't realize is you don't go straight to a VC if you have an idea or you have a business that is even doing well. You wait for venture capitalists to be a part of the equation when you're ready to basically scale, because the difference between obviously a startup and a small business is that startups can scale, whereas small businesses, they're kind of limited to their markets or their different niches. But personally, for me, I got into the industry because I saw how, frankly, it's more, I don't know if the right term is parasitic or if it's more like vulture-like. I mean, the V in my mind is like a vulture, because what ends up unfortunately happening is these venture capitalists that are out there are all about, they won't say it to your face, by the way, that they're all about trying to extract as much value from your organization. And in the end, it doesn't feel like what I hope that we will be doing, and that is to do it kind of like in a family manner where we're helping one another rise together. And so I got into it that way. To be honest, it was a long road up through that time to really understand if this made sense. But yeah, in short, that was how I got into venture capital.
So you had your own project. Did you find a venture capitalist, or no, you decided to start your own venture capital firm, Good People's Ventures?
No, GPV, Good People's Ventures, didn't start until, frankly, early this year. In 2020, when I was actually approaching venture capitalists or VCs, I was almost immediately sickened by their behavior. I had heard from our accelerators stories about what would happen. So we were in 3 accelerators in that year, or year preceding year. And I started to schedule appointments with venture capitalists. And in my first meeting, I was truly, truly disappointed in the whole process. I knew I could continue down the path, which everybody has the ability to basically knock on the doors and pitch all the VCs. But almost immediately, I realized this was not the way I wanted to fund the organization. We did a crowdfunding campaign, which was more for marketing. And we also bootstrapped for the most part, because I just used $100,000 of my own money to build the startup. Unfortunately, the startup had to be put on pause a couple years ago because it's unfortunately a little too early to, have when I leave. The whole end of life industry is still not ready to change. People are not ready to change. People don't want to think about death, which is what unfortunately, becomes a problem as you get to that stage in life. But yeah.
Timing is everything sometimes, especially with
It is.
startups, right? The market needs to be ready. And sometimes it's not the idea that fails, it's just the timing.
Right, right.
So, for listeners who might not be familiar or perhaps want a little bit more in depth about what a venture capitalist is and what their day to day looks like, can you share a bit of insights?
Yeah, yeah. No, that's a great question. To be honest, I think the term gets easily confused with money. Like that's the way we grow a company. But there's four stages, or rather, VC is the fourth stage. I would argue you should approach when you're building a company. First, like I just mentioned, bootstrapping. Everybody should use their own money, right? You get full control if you actually use your own money, right? You don't have to give any part of your company to anyone if you use your own money. Well, if you get extended, or rather you don't want to use any more, and you're starting to open your company to different ownership, then the next stage, which Jeff Bezos made very famous, is friends and family. So you approach your friends and family, and you basically want to maybe ask for a certain amount to help you get to the next stage, and you can decide at that point, like, whatever percentages seem to make sense. I think Jeff Bezos' brother probably benefited really well from Amazon because he got in on early, and I think a lot of his family. And then the third stage is angel investing. So at that point, where let's say your friends and family either say no, or they've only funded you to a certain degree, people can, or rather startup founders can approach these people who have high net worths and are willing to put anywhere from 10,000 or 25,000 on up, and sometimes even in the millions. They are not as vulture-like, in my opinion, as the VCs, but at the same time, it really depends. Everybody wants a return on their money. And so the term angel might not be so angelic with some angel investors, but it is what it is. And they're easier to deal with because you're talking about individuals, right? But then if you want to scale, which is what the famous story of Uber or Microsoft or Google is, or even Facebook, you will approach VCs, venture capitalists, who have larger check sizes, because these VCs have typically large funds. And so, like, our initial fund is going to be $50 million. That's what our goal is. These other companies might have funds as little as 10 million on up to, let's say, 310 million. So, for example, there is a fund out there, or the first fund for a VC I know, and you can find out by Minnie Ingersoll's podcast. It's called LA Venture. And she interviews Mel Tang, I think is his name, the co-founder of Ring. Everybody knows Ring, right? The front door thing. His first fund was 310 million from what I recall. And so he has literally 310 million to distribute to all these different startups. And what they will do is, strike an agreement, a safe or whatever version of the agreement is, and they'll give you, let's say, on average, like $2 million for a percentage of your company. So VCs are there to help you with what they call the hockey stick of growth. So you better be ready for the ride of your life once you contact a VC, because once they give you that check, they're going to be riding you to the end. Because I mean, the goal for the VC is to probably get you to IPO or some form of liquidity event, right? So they want to exit from their 2 million, they want to turn that into 10 million or 100 million. In the case of Google, Facebook, and all these other companies who got in early, it probably was like 100 times their initial investment, which is what they're trying to do, right? But, there's other ones that fail and don't succeed, and that's why they're able to basically give out all those checks, is because one or two become a quote unquote unicorn, which is what their goal is. That helps.
It does. And it also helps to clarify, like I had mentioned before, being a business consultant or even as a SCORE mentor, a lot of people are under the impression that the process is immediate. I'm going to form a company or I have an idea, and they're immediately in their minds thinking I'm going to fund it either with grants or look for venture capitalists to fund it. And it requires a couple of steps before it gets to that point.
Exactly. And I might have mentioned it maybe before our interview here, but there's crowdfunding options now. There are syndicates that are kind of versions of angel investors. There's so many different types of, like, funding. If you read Brad Feld's, I can't remember what the name of his book is. He's a very famous person who kind of outlines a lot of the finance financial aspects of funding. He can give you an idea. One of my recent interviews with Kimberly Kovacs, she's the CEO of Renew. She has this rich history in VC funding and the cap table, which we haven't talked about yet. And she outlines a lot of the most amazing kind of ways of actually getting funding, including, from what I remember, she said something about indenture notes or some kind of like bond or something you convert from an agreement where, you automatically give them equity. You could do something where they have the right to equity, which I don't know if your listeners understand what equity is, but basically a share of the company. And so sometimes you can do things very creatively to get what you need.
Is that the same as vested equity? I've heard the term vested.
No, vesting, the concept of vesting is basically when you obtain the equity, right? It's like when you actually buy the equity or the equity is finally in your rights. Like, for example, when I joined Amazon years ago, so I joined in 2001, if I recall correctly, I got 1,000 shares as options, right? And it vested over a period of 4 years. So I got 25% every single year. And so I had the right to buy it at $12 a share. And so if I would have known that it would have been $2,000-3,000 a share in 20 years, obviously I would have probably vested and purchased the stock, but I didn't know at that time. We were actually under the impression that eBay would take over the world at that time. And we were actually worried more of our collapse than we were of our success, or at least the employees were. Jeff, on the other hand, was probably a little bit different in terms of mindset.
If you were advising a bootstrapped SaaS or software as a service founder in their first year, what 2 or 3 metrics would you tell them to obsess over in order to succeed and then start looking for an investor?
So, Sheila, I would say maybe not obsess over the metrics as much as obsess over a couple of different things that I think most startups who succeed potentially obsess over. Those would be the team. Because to be honest, if your team is not effective at, executing on the different aspects of growth or finance or maybe even legal, unfortunately, you won't be able to grow the startup in the way that most startups want to succeed, right? As the CEO or maybe even the co-founder, you can't do everything on your own. So your team is actually very, very important. So, I mean, if you had to delineate to a certain metric, is maybe growing a team to a certain number and then tying it to perhaps revenue. I mean, maybe that's maybe the other metric, if you want to keep track of metrics, is making sure you are profitable. Because one thing that I think a lot of companies in the early stages fail to do is they don't operate like a traditional business, which is you gotta make money, right? They have this perception that you can just borrow the heck out of the world and then ride it to the end, and that your check will be basically what takes care of you till the end. It's not true. You have to have a sound business that will operate all across, the entire path until the end. So those are a couple things that I would say. Again, I wouldn't focus on the metrics as much, because here in the beginning, you need to have a solid foundation. And I think that's what, unfortunately, a lot of these companies fail to have. And part of it is because they have one missing piece, which is grit. And that's something that a lot of companies, or rather startups, don't talk about. But I will tell you, every single VC that I know will be focused on the founder. And what they won't tell you is possibly the secret is which founders actually have grit and are able to basically get back from any potential setback. Because, I just did another podcast interview recently, and what she specifically said is the most successful startup founders, and by the way, she's invested in so many of them, and she was on Wall Street for many, many years, but her thoughts were the most successful startup founders are the ones that bounce back, the ones that don't get stressed out about losses. They don't get stressed out about product market fit not happening right at the beginning, right? Or they don't get stressed out about the fact that they have to pitch 2,000 VCs. So the ones that have the grit or the ability to persist through this stuff are the ones who succeed.
Interesting. So, data shows that women led startups receive a lot less funding than their male counterparts. So, from your perspective, why does this gap exist?
Well, unfortunately, the industry, or rather business in general, has always been male dominated, right? And primarily it's because women were doing things like raising kids, or they were, in the traditional sense, they were pursuing different things that were considered female responsibilities. I'll be honest, my favorite business people are women. And the reason is because they're so caring. They're very caring to the degree that they care beyond even the business, and their children. The startup founder I was just talking about, Ellie, was telling me about her daughters, for example, when we were having the interview. Like, that's one of her most proud accomplishments, is her daughters, right? Male founders are funny to a certain degree because they don't worry necessarily, because they know that their wife is taken care of. So women have an extra burden, I would say. So I think that's part of the challenge. And the boardrooms are male dominated. The industry's male dominated as far as funding. So if you look at the VCs that are in the top, they're all male dominated, and they don't take the same perspective of business, and they're very much like sharks when it comes to investing, right? It's going to take some time.
What can we do to help more women be successful with their startups or raising their capital?
Well, first off, I did see this in my Clubhouse days. So I don't know if you know Clubhouse, but there was this social media, I guess, startup called Clubhouse in 2020. Funny enough, the reason why I got into Clubhouse is I was helping two women who were trying to empower other women to do e-commerce and other kind of businesses, from a women's perspective, because they told me at that time, that was the first time I had heard about this, is that 98% of the VC funding goes to men and only 2% go to women. And so I was shocked, so much so that I was actually disappointed. And I was kind of on this, war path of, I'm going to change this. And so I would run into these rooms and I would support the women. And then all of a sudden they would turn to me and they go, "Why are you here? You're a guy. Why would you want to help us?" And so I got questioned a lot. And it wasn't just towards me. I had a lot of female founder friends who said they were attacked for supporting me, or they were also not working together. They were attacking one another. So some of the women were bringing each other down, and it's really sad. Now, I won't say that's the case across the board, because I've been fortunate to meet amazing female founders. So I mentioned Kimberly Kovacs, for example, or Ellie, as far as she runs Thravos. Another one, Kate Bradley, she runs a company called Lately, which is a social media AI company. And all of these women are amazing. They were trying to help each other. But I did see this kind of infighting, which is unfortunate, because you guys have to work as a team. And I believe that's the best way. And focus on the younger women coming up, right? And so, like, our first intern and my co-founder are both female. And we made sure in our VC that the women quotient, or the women in the organization, will always have a certain percentage, because we believe in women's equity as far as business is concerned.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And that's pretty interesting how you started getting questioned why you wanted to help women. So I wasn't expecting that answer. So that's a little bit about Good People's Ventures and how people can either connect with you or learn more about what you do.
Sure. Thank you for even asking. So what Good People's Ventures basically is, it's an accelerator backed by VC funds. And we're currently actually positioning ourselves to think about maybe incubating. So incubating, starting companies, accelerating, making them grow faster. And then the VC component is the funding, right? And so we're kind of a hybrid of sorts, with the hopes of actually helping the education industry. So we've definitely leaned into that and have decided that will be the vertical we focus on. A lot of VCs like to work in several verticals to kind of offset, to make sure that they don't lose across the board. For example, let's say education is not the best place to invest in. They might invest in, let's say, food services or something like that, or maybe entertainment. And so they have three different areas to invest in. We've decided education is the primary area that really needs the help. despite the fact that it doesn't have the most sexy results, at least in the United States, we intend to invest in that area regardless, because Vicky and I, the co-founder, and now we have a new partner on our team, have decided that we will do whatever we possibly can to change that part of at least the world, because we do feel like that's very lacking right now. And so GPV is focused on education using basically three different types of, I guess, startup support. We have not raised our fund yet. We're still in the process. So one thing that people don't understand is VCs actually have to go out and beg for the money. So we're in that stage right now and approaching a lot of people. But we'd love to have anybody, be a supporter, whether it be just someone on social media to actually investors. So we are currently actually talking to several potential LPs, and then the list just continues to grow and grow as people learn more about us.
So what is your next milestone?
My next milestone would probably be making sure we have, I would say, around 8 or so LP candidates by 2026. The interesting thing is it's not just one milestone. We have several. We are also considering, and I can't tell the whole secret yet, but this is going to be possibly the most revolutionary accelerator in history, because we have an idea that's combining some of my Korean background, and which a lot of people don't realize. Korea is one of the most tech-savvy, innovative countries in the world. They were rated #1, I believe, by AP News 2 or 3 years ago. I've always known how Korea kind of advances along the technological path, and frankly, they're very innovative. And so we're going to leverage some of that ideation kind of stuff with this accelerator. And so that is also something that would be one of the milestones that we're trying to attain by spring of 2026. And lastly, obviously it's always good to have the team formed. So we're currently looking for a fourth and fifth partner. And so we're hoping to have those folks on board by the end of this year.
And what are you looking for in regards to the partners?
So typically VCs or folks in this industry come with two types of really, really useful experiences. One is the founder or operator type of individual who has figured out how to build and exited a lot of times, or at least has learned how to, operate these companies. The other person is the person who's actually been in the VC world. So they know how to fund, they know how to raise funds, they know how the legalities of raising funds are. And so we would like a mix, somebody who has both. And so we're looking for somebody who does walk the walk, and somebody who is financially, frankly, stable enough that they don't need a salary. Because in the VC world, VCs sometimes come to the table paying for their job. They come with $1 million or $2 million. The good news with our firm is you don't have to bring the huge check, but we won't be paying you a salary. We'll be paying you basically the carry is what they call it. So we'll be investing in these companies on the money that we raise. And then the benefit to our partners is that they'll get a portion of the wins in the VC firm.
And to learn more, they can visit goodpeoplesventures.com.
Correct. And if anybody wants to contact me directly, just put Brandon in front of that domain and you can get a hold of me.
Well, thank you so much, Brandon, for joining me today and sharing all of these insights into the VC world.
Well, it was wonderful spending this time with you here today, Sheila. And thank you for your understanding, and thank you for your time.
And thank you all for tuning in to another episode of Milestone Moments in Business and Leadership. Until next time.